The morning my ex-husband's widow slapped me in the hallway outside probate court and screamed that I had stolen her future, I still believed his death was a tragic accident. I did not yet know it was murder. My name is Lorraine Whitaker. I am 62 years old, a night shift hospice nurse in a small coastal town outside Savannah, Georgia. I have held the hands of strangers as they took their last breath. I thought I understood grief. I did not understand revenge. Not then. When the lawyer called 3 weeks after Daniel Mercer died, I was folding laundry in my narrow kitchen, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the distant cry of gulls. Daniel had been my husband for 27 years before our divorce. We had no children. What we had was a long history of family drama, quiet betrayal, and a final Thanksgiving dinner that shattered us. The lawyer, a soft-spoken man named Gregory Hale, told me Daniel's will had been read. And, I remember asking, bracing myself, "And he left you everything, Miss Whitaker." Everything. Daniel owned Mercer Marine Supply, a thriving company that serviced yachts along the Georgia coast. He owned a historic mansion near the marshlands, investment accounts, and a life insurance policy large enough to make my knees weak. The total estate was valued at nearly $48 million. His current wife, Vanessa Mercer, age 44, had been excluded. I sat down slowly, my hand gripping the edge of the counter. "That can't be right," I whispered. "It is," Gregory said. "The will was updated last year. The same year Vanessa hosted that lavish Christmas party and paraded through the mansion in a red silk dress, introducing me as Daniel's practice run. That was our last confrontation. I had left early, humiliated, the scent of pine and expensive perfume burning in my lungs. Daniel had followed me into the driveway, snowless but cold. "You deserved better than what I gave you," he had said quietly. "I'm trying to fix things." I thought he meant an apology. I did not realize he meant his will. When Vanessa saw me outside the courtroom that morning, her eyes were wild. Mascara streaked her cheeks. "You manipulated him," she hissed. "You poisoned his mind." "I haven't spoken to Daniel in months," I replied. She laughed, a sharp, broken sound. "You think this is over? I'll contest the will. I'll drag you through every judge and every court in Georgia." There it was, the first threat. That night, alone in my small rented house, I replayed every memory. Our divorce had been ugly, but quiet. No screaming, just distance. Daniel wanted children in his 40s. I was already tired, already grieving the miscarriage we never spoke about. Vanessa, younger and bright, had given him the illusion of starting over. So why had he changed the inheritance? 3 days later, Gregory called again. "There's something else," he said. "Daniel added a sealed letter to the will. It's addressed to you. It can only be opened if his death is ruled accidental." My throat tightened. And it was ruled accidental. A car crash. "Yes," he said slowly. "A brake failure on a rural highway at night." Brake failure. Daniel had been meticulous. He inspected his own cars. He did not ignore maintenance. He did not drive carelessly. For the first time, a thin thread of doubt slid into my chest. At the funeral, Vanessa had clung to the casket, wailing. But I remember something strange. When the sheriff described the crash, she did not look surprised. She looked prepared. That memory came back to me as I sat alone in Gregory's office, staring at the sealed envelope with my name written in Daniel's familiar handwriting. Lorraine. My fingers trembled as I broke the seal. Inside was a single page. "If you are reading this, it means I did not live long enough to tell you the truth. Vanessa has been pressuring me to transfer controlling shares of the company to her brother. I refused. If anything happens to me, do not trust the accident report. Please look deeper. I believe I am being manipulated. I am afraid." Afraid. Daniel Mercer had never been afraid of anything. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. This was no longer about inheritance. It was about betrayal. About a hidden truth, buried under polished condolences and sympathy casseroles. And suddenly, Vanessa's fury in the courthouse hallway made sense. She wasn't grieving her husband. She was terrified. I folded the letter carefully and slipped it into my purse. My hands were steady now. For 27 years, I had been the quiet wife, the accommodating one. The one who stepped aside when favoritism and manipulation crept into my marriage. But I had spent 3 decades watching people die. I knew what regret looked like, and I knew what guilt looked like too. If Vanessa thought I would quietly accept her lawsuit and write her a check just to make this go away, she did not know the woman I had become. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the marsh and painted the water blood orange, I made a decision. I would not only defend the will, I would investigate my ex-husband's death. And if someone had turned break failure into murder, I would make sure the truth dragged them into the light, even if it destroyed us all. What I did not yet know was that Vanessa had already taken the first step to destroy me. And she had help. Vanessa filed the lawsuit exactly 10 days after the funeral. I was halfway through a night shift at the hospice center when my supervisor handed me the envelope. The fluorescent lights buzzed above us. A patient down the hall was crying softly in her sleep. "You okay, Lorraine?" she asked gently. "I will be," I said. But when I stepped into the empty break room and opened the papers, my hands began to shake. Vanessa Mercer was contesting the will on grounds of undue influence and mental instability. According to her filing, I had manipulated Daniel during a supposed secret reconciliation. She claimed he had been confused, vulnerable, pressured. The audacity of it burned. We had not reconciled. We had not even had dinner together in over a year. Yet as I read further, something colder settled in my chest. Vanessa's attorney was not some local amateur. She had hired Malcolm Price, a high-profile Savannah litigator known for tearing reputations apart in court. I recognized his name from a notorious inheritance battle that had dominated headlines 2 years earlier. This was not grief speaking. This was strategy. I called Gregory Hale immediately. "She's trying to paint you as manipulative," he said calmly. "But the will is airtight." Daniel updated it with witnesses, psychological evaluation included. "Psychological evaluation?" I repeated. "Yes," he insisted. Another detail he had never told me. Why had Daniel gone to such lengths? 2 days later, I received something unexpected. A manila envelope slipped under my front door. No postage, no return address. Inside were photographs. Daniel's car, crumpled metal, the underside exposed, and a close-up of the brake line. It was cleanly cut, not worn, not rusted, cut. My breath left my body in a slow, horrified exhale. Attached was a sticky note. She paid in cash. No signature. I sat on the floor of my living room for a long time, the hum of the air conditioner the only sound. My mind raced through possibilities. Who would send this? A mechanic? An accomplice? Someone feeling guilty? I thought of Daniel's letter. Do not trust the accident report. I went to the sheriff's office the next morning. The deputy on duty, a broad-shouldered woman named Carla Ruiz, listened without interrupting as I placed the photographs on her desk. "Where did you get these?" she asked. "Someone wants me to know. It wasn't an accident." Carla studied the image carefully. "The official report says mechanical failure." Then someone lied. She leaned back in her chair. "If this is real, Mrs. Whitaker, you're suggesting homicide." "I am." She hesitated. "You understand this will escalate things." "It already has." That afternoon, Vanessa held a press conference outside the courthouse. I watched it on the small television in my kitchen. She wore black, her hair perfectly styled, tears glistening but controlled. "I loved my husband," she said to the cameras, "and I have been cruelly excluded from his will by a bitter ex-wife who could not let go." Bitter. The word hit harder than I expected. The narrative was forming. Toxic family, jealous former spouse, manipulation. I could almost see the judge's raised eyebrow, but Vanessa made one mistake. When a reporter asked about the accident, she said, "Daniel had been careless lately, distracted. He sometimes forgot things." Forgot things. Gregory had told me about the psychological evaluation. Daniel had been declared mentally sound. Why would she imply otherwise? That night, I received a call from a private number, a man's voice, low and tight with fear. "She met with my cousin 2 weeks before the crash," he said. "He works at a garage outside town. She offered him $10,000 to tamper with a vehicle." My pulse pounded in my ears. Did he do it? "No," the voice snapped. "He said no. But someone else might not have." "Who are you?" Silence. Then the line went dead. I sat there in the dark, heart racing. Vanessa was not just contesting the inheritance. She was covering something. And if she had truly paid someone to cut Daniel's brake line, then this was no longer about money. It was about revenge of a different kind. The next morning, I found deep scratches along the side of my car. Keyed, a message carved into the paint. Thief. She was escalating. So would I. Because if Vanessa wanted a confrontation, if she wanted a judge, a courtroom, and the full weight of public scrutiny, I would give it to her. But I would not walk in alone. I would walk in with proof. And I had just realized something terrifying. If she had been willing to kill her own husband for control of a company and a mansion, what would stop her from coming after me next? The inheritance had made me a target. But the truth? The truth might get me killed. The first time I truly believed Vanessa Mercer might try to kill me was not when my car was keyed. It was when my hospice patient's oxygen line was found deliberately loosened during my shift. Her name was Eleanor Pike. She was 81, fragile, and drifting between sleep and shallow breaths when I checked her at midnight. The oxygen mask sat crooked across her face. The tubing had been twisted just enough to restrict the flow. Not an accident. Not something a confused elderly woman could have done with arthritic hands. My stomach turned cold as I fixed the line and checked her pulse. Steady. Thank God. But someone had entered that room, and only staff had access. I did not want to jump to paranoia, but I had lived long enough to recognize patterns. First the lawsuit, then the anonymous photos, then the threatening vandalism. Now this. A warning. I reported it immediately. My supervisor frowned, reviewing the hallway camera footage. "There's no one entering her room except you," she said carefully. Except me. The implication hung between us. I felt a flush rise in my cheeks. Are you saying I tampered with my own patient? I'm saying the footage shows no one else. When I got home at dawn, exhausted and shaking, I found another envelope tucked beneath my door. This one contained a flash drive. My hands trembled as I inserted it into my laptop. A video file appeared. Security footage from a dimly lit parking lot. The timestamp was 2 weeks before Daniel's crash. A black SUV pulled into the frame. Vanessa stepped out, her heels clicking on the pavement. She approached a man standing near a garage bay door. They spoke for several minutes. Then she handed him a thick envelope. Cash. Clear as day. My pulse pounded as I replayed the clip. Whoever had sent this wanted me to know the truth. But why not go to the police? Unless they were afraid. Or unless they wanted me to be the one who brought Vanessa down. That thought unsettled me more than anything. Because it meant someone out there was watching this unfold, like a chess match. Later that morning, I met with Gregory Hale and Deputy Carla Ruiz in Gregory's office. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, dust floating in the air. Carla watched the footage twice. "This is significant," she said, "but it's circumstantial unless we identify the man and prove what was discussed." Gregory leaned forward. "Lorraine, if this becomes a criminal investigation, Vanessa's legal team will attack you relentlessly. They'll say you fabricated evidence to protect the inheritance." "I know," I said quietly. "But do you still want to proceed?" I thought about Eleanor Pike gasping in her bed. I thought about the word thief carved into my car. And I thought about Daniel's letter, his final admission of fear. "Yes," I said. "I'm not backing down." 3 days later, Vanessa made her next move. A restraining order. She accused me of harassment, claiming I had been stalking her home and spreading defamatory rumors. The accusation was absurd. But it accomplished exactly what she intended. It painted me publicly as unstable. Local news picked up the story. My name appeared in headlines beside words like bitter ex-wife and inheritance feud. At work, whispers followed me down the halls. Nurses who once shared coffee with me now avoided eye contact. Isolation crept in slowly, like a cold fog. But then, something unexpected happened. A woman approached me in the hospital parking lot one evening. She was in her late 50s, wearing a worn denim jacket and clutching a grocery bag. "You're Lorraine Whitaker, right?" she asked softly. "Yes." She hesitated, glancing around. "My name is June Talbot. My brother worked at Mercer Marine Supply until last year." My pulse quickened. "Why did he leave?" "He didn't leave," she said. "He was fired after reporting financial irregularities. He believed someone inside the company was moving money into shell accounts." "Vanessa?" I whispered. June nodded. He said she was pushing Daniel to sign documents transferring majority control to her family. A chill ran through me. Motivation, greed, control, all aligning perfectly with Daniel's letter. June reached into her bag and handed me a folder. These are copies of the reports my brother made before he was forced out, she said. He was terrified. Said someone warned him to stop digging. Where is he now? I asked. Her eyes filled with tears. He died in a hit and run 6 months ago. The words hit like a physical blow. Another accident. Another death connected to Vanessa's ambitions. My hands tightened around the folder. This was no longer just about my ex-husband. This was a pattern. And suddenly, the scale of what I was facing became terrifyingly clear. Vanessa Mercer wasn't just manipulative. She was dangerous. And she had been covering her tracks for a very long time. That night, as I spread the financial documents across my kitchen table, I realized something that made my skin crawl. Daniel's death had not been the beginning. It had been the culmination. And if I kept digging, I might uncover something far bigger than inheritance fraud. But once I crossed that line, there would be no turning back. Because people connected to Vanessa Mercer had a habit of dying in accidents, and I had just become her biggest threat. The first time someone tried to follow me home, I almost convinced myself I was imagining it. Almost. It happened on a humid evening in late summer. The air smelled of salt and marsh grass as I drove away from the hospice center after a long shift. My headlights caught the reflection of another car in the rearview mirror, a gray sedan. It stayed exactly 3 car lengths behind me for nearly 20 minutes. Every turn I made, it mirrored. My heart began to pound. I tested it by turning onto a narrow residential street I never used. The sedan followed. That was when fear stopped being abstract. I drove straight to the sheriff's office instead of going home. The sedan slowed, hesitated, then continued past the building without stopping. I sat in the parking lot for several minutes, gripping the steering wheel, my palms slick with sweat. They were watching me. Deputy Carla Ruiz took the situation seriously. Within days, she arranged for a patrol car to drive past my house periodically. But protection brought attention, and attention brought escalation. Vanessa's lawsuit moved forward aggressively. Her attorney, Malcolm Price, filed motions demanding access to my financial history, personal communications, even medical records from the years surrounding my divorce from Daniel. He wanted to dismantle my credibility, piece by piece. In his deposition questions, he repeated one phrase over and over: motive for revenge. He was building a narrative that I had resented being replaced by a younger wife, and manipulated Daniel into rewriting his will. The irony was almost unbearable, because the truth was the opposite. I had spent years avoiding conflict with Daniel and Vanessa. Even at the Christmas party humiliation, I had left quietly instead of confronting them. But Malcolm Price did not care about truth. He cared about perception. 2 weeks before the first court hearing, something unexpected shifted the case. Deputy Carla Ruiz called me early one morning. "We identified the man in the parking lot footage," she said. "His name is Trevor Haynes. He's a mechanic with a history of fraud charges." My pulse jumped. "Did he talk?" "At first, no," she said. "But when we showed him the footage and mentioned possible murder charges, he panicked." My breath caught. "What did he say?" Carla's voice lowered. "He admitted Vanessa approached him with an offer to disable Daniel's car. He refused. But he gave us the name of someone who might have accepted the job." The room seemed to tilt. "Who?" I whispered. "A man named Curtis Boone. He disappeared shortly after the crash." Disappeared. My stomach twisted. "Do you think he's dead?" I asked. "We don't know," Carla said. "But Lorraine, this confirms intent." Intent. The word carried enormous weight. In court, it could mean the difference between a civil dispute and a criminal investigation. But before we could act on this breakthrough, Vanessa struck again. That afternoon, I returned home to find my front door slightly ajar. Every instinct in my body screamed danger. I stepped inside slowly. The living room looked untouched. The air smelled faintly of lavender cleaner. But when I reached the kitchen, I froze. Daniel's letter lay on the table. I had locked it in a drawer. Someone had taken it out. Next to it sat a single photograph, a recent one, taken from across the street. It showed me standing outside my house just days earlier, watching me, tracking me. A message written in black marker across the photo. Stop digging, or you're next. My hands shook so violently, I had to sit down. This was no longer subtle intimidation. This was a direct threat, and it confirmed something terrifying. Vanessa wasn't just reacting defensively to a lawsuit. She was actively trying to silence me, because she knew the truth was getting dangerously close. That night, as I sat in the dark with the photograph clutched in my hands, one thought echoed louder than fear. If she was this desperate to stop me, then I was getting very close to something that could destroy her completely. And for the first time since Daniel's death, I realized something else. This was no longer just about justice. It was about survival, because someone had already broken into my home. And next time, they might not leave a warning. The night after someone broke into my house, I did not sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with every light on, a mug of cold coffee between my hands, staring at the photograph they had left behind. The black marker letters looked almost carved into the image. Stop digging, or you're next. I had spent years sitting beside dying patients, listening to the shallow rhythm of their breathing, watching life slip away quietly. I thought I understood fear, but this was different. This was the kind of fear that crawled under your skin and stayed there. It was also the kind that slowly hardened into something else. Resolve. At dawn, I called Deputy Carla Ruiz. She arrived within 30 minutes, her expression tightening when she saw the forced drawer and the photograph. This is escalation, she said firmly. We'll dust for prints, but whoever did this likely wore gloves. Vanessa? I asked. Carla hesitated. We can't prove she came here. But intimidation like this usually comes from someone close to the situation, someone working for her. The thought made my stomach churn. 2 days later, the first major hearing in the inheritance case took place. The courthouse smelled faintly of old wood and polish. Vanessa sat across the room from me, dressed in a charcoal suit, her hair sleek, her expression composed. Anyone watching would see a grieving widow. I saw something else. Calculation. Her attorney, Malcolm Price, began immediately. He painted me as a bitter ex-wife consumed by revenge. He described my long career in hospice as evidence that I was emotionally hardened by death. He implied I had manipulated Daniel during a supposed secret reconciliation. Each word felt like a small cut, but Gregory Hale remained calm beside me. When it was his turn, he presented Daniel's psychological evaluation. Medical records, witness statements confirming Daniel had personally insisted on updating his will. Then Gregory did something unexpected. He submitted the sealed letter Daniel had written. Vanessa's face went pale. The judge, Eleanor Marks, read the letter slowly, her eyes narrowing. This suggests the deceased feared manipulation, she said. A murmur spread through the courtroom. Malcolm Price objected immediately, but the damage was done. The narrative had shifted. For the first time, Vanessa did not look confident. She looked frightened. After the hearing, as I walked toward the parking lot, a man stepped out from behind a pillar. I tensed instantly. He raised his hand slightly. I'm not here to hurt you, he said quickly. My name is Derek Boone. The last name hit like a jolt. Curtis Boone? I asked. My brother, he said quietly. My pulse raced. Where is he? Derek's jaw tightened. Dead. The word hung heavy between us. 2 months after Daniel Mercer's crash, he continued, Curtis was found in a motel outside Jacksonville. Police ruled it an overdose. An overdose. Another convenient accident. He told me before he died that a woman paid him to sabotage a car, Derek said. He didn't know whose car. He only knew she was wealthy, desperate, and promised cash up front. Vanessa, I whispered. Derek nodded slowly. Curtis kept a recording of their meeting as insurance. He was paranoid. Hope flared in my chest. A recording? I repeated. Yes, he hid it. I found it last week when I cleaned out his storage unit. My heart pounded. Do you have it? He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device. I want justice, he said. Curtis made terrible choices, but he didn't deserve to die for them. Neither did Daniel. I took the recorder with trembling hands. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something stronger than fear. Momentum. Because if the recording contained Vanessa's voice, it would not just prove intent, it would destroy her completely. I listened to the recording alone in my car, parked near the marsh where Daniel once took me walking during our early marriage. The device clicked softly before a woman's voice filled the silence. Calm, controlled, familiar. Vanessa. I need the brakes to fail, she said in a low, steady tone. It must look like an accident. My hands began to shake. A man's voice responded nervously. That's risky. You'll be paid well, Vanessa replied. No one will trace it back. The recording ended with the sound of an envelope sliding across a table. I sat there, unable to breathe for several seconds. This was not suspicion. This was proof. Cold, undeniable proof of murder. Within hours, Deputy Carla Ruiz had the recording secured as evidence. The district attorney's office became involved immediately, but the legal process moved slower than fear, because Vanessa did not know yet that we had this. And that made her unpredictable. 3 nights later, I woke to the sound of glass shattering. My heart slammed against my ribs. Someone was breaking into my house again. I grabbed my phone and dialed emergency services with shaking fingers. The dispatcher told me to stay hidden. Footsteps moved through the living room, slow, careful. I held my breath, crouched inside my bedroom closet. The footsteps stopped outside my door. Silence. Then a man's voice whispered through the darkness. Lorraine Whitaker. My blood ran cold. We know what you have, he continued quietly. Give it to us, and you walk away. Not Vanessa alone. This was bigger. I said nothing. Minutes passed. Finally, the footsteps retreated. A back door slammed. Only then did I realize I was trembling so violently I could barely stand. Police arrived within minutes. They found signs of forced entry, but no suspect. Carla's expression was grim. This confirms it, she said. Vanessa is not acting alone. She likely has accomplices. Her brother, I whispered suddenly. The name surfaced from Daniel's letter. Vanessa had been pressuring Daniel to transfer company control to her brother. Carla nodded slowly. We're investigating that connection now. The realization struck me with chilling clarity. This wasn't just about inheritance. It was about corporate control, millions of dollars, power. And Daniel had stood in their way. As dawn light crept through my broken window, I understood something terrifying. Vanessa hadn't just killed her husband. She had orchestrated an entire network of intimidation to protect her secret. And now that the truth was close to exposure, she was becoming desperate. Desperate people made dangerous decisions. Later that afternoon, Gregory Hale called with urgent news. The judge has scheduled an emergency hearing, he said. New evidence has surfaced. The court wants both parties present tomorrow morning. My heart raced. Does Vanessa know about the recording? I asked. Not yet, he replied. A strange calm settled over me, because tomorrow, in that courtroom, everything would change. Vanessa Mercer had spent months painting me as a bitter woman seeking revenge, but she had no idea that the real confrontation was about to begin. And once the recording played in open court, there would be no hiding, no manipulation. No escape. What none of us knew yet was how far Vanessa was willing to go to stop that from happening. Because that night, as I prepared for the hearing, a black SUV pulled quietly to a stop across the street from my house. And it did not leave. The black SUV stayed parked across from my house all night. I watched it from behind my living room curtains, lights off, heart beating in a slow, heavy rhythm that felt almost unnatural. The vehicle's engine was off. No movement inside. Just a dark shape sitting there like a silent threat, waiting. By dawn, it was gone. But the message was clear. They were watching my every move. I drove to the courthouse with Deputy Carla Ruiz following behind me in a patrol car. Even with police presence, my hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel. Fear had settled into my body like an old ache, constant and familiar. The courtroom was already packed when I arrived. Reporters lined the back rows. The inheritance case had transformed into something much bigger than a family dispute. Vanessa sat at the plaintiff's table, composed as always, though her eyes flickered briefly when she saw Carla take a seat near me. Her attorney, Malcolm Price, rose first. Your Honor, he began smoothly. This hearing is based on alleged evidence that has not been verified. We ask that it be excluded until proper authentication. Judge Eleanor Marks lifted a hand. I will determine admissibility after reviewing it, she said calmly. Proceed. Gregory Hale stood and nodded toward me. My throat tightened as I walked to the witness stand. The wood felt cold beneath my fingers as I took the oath. Ms. Whitaker, Gregory said gently, please explain how you came into possession of the recording. My voice shook at first, but steadied as I described Derek Boone, the storage unit, and the device. Then Gregory pressed a button on the audio player. Vanessa's voice filled the courtroom. I need the brakes to fail. A ripple of shock moved through the room like a physical wave. Vanessa's face drained of color. Her hands clenched so tightly around the table edge that her knuckles turned white. No, she whispered hoarsely. That's not real. But it was. The judge's expression hardened as the recording ended. This court will recess while we verify authenticity, she announced sharply. Vanessa stood abruptly, turning toward me. Her composure shattered completely. You think you've won? She hissed under her breath. You have no idea what you've done. Her eyes were no longer angry. They were terrified. During the recess, Carla pulled me aside into a quiet hallway. There's more, she said in a low voice. We just received confirmation that Vanessa's brother, Leonard Crane, withdrew a large amount of cash the same week Curtis Boone disappeared. The name struck like a bolt. Leonard Crane, the man Daniel had refused to give company control. This connects them directly, I whispered. Carla nodded grimly. We're preparing arrest warrants. Relief should have come. Instead, dread crept in, because Vanessa had just heard the recording in open court, and desperate people did dangerous things. When the hearing resumed, the judge's decision was swift. The recording is admissible, Judge Mark stated. Furthermore, this court finds sufficient evidence to refer the matter for criminal investigation. Gasps filled the room. Vanessa's attorney looked stunned. Vanessa herself stared straight ahead, motionless. For a brief moment, I thought it was over. Then she slowly turned her head toward me and smiled. Not a relieved smile. Not even an angry one. A chilling, hollow smile that sent ice through my veins. That night, I understood why. Because she was not planning to fight the charges. She was planning something else. Something far more dangerous. The attack happened 2 days after the hearing. I was leaving the hospice center just before sunset. The sky glowed soft orange over the marsh, the air thick with humidity. I remember thinking, for the first time in months, that maybe the worst was behind me. Then I heard running footsteps. Fast. Close. Before I could react, a hand grabbed my arm and yanked me backward. A cloth pressed hard over my mouth. A chemical smell burned my lungs. Panic exploded through me. I struggled wildly, but my body felt suddenly weak, heavy, unresponsive. The last thing I saw before darkness swallowed everything was the face of the man holding me, and I recognized him instantly. Leonard Crane, Vanessa's brother. When I woke, my head throbbed, and my mouth tasted bitter. I was lying on a cold concrete floor in a dim room, a warehouse. The air smelled of oil and rust. My hands were tied behind my back. Footsteps echoed nearby. Leonard stepped into the light. He was in his early 50s, tall, broad-shouldered, with the same sharp eyes as his sister. You should have stayed quiet, he said flatly. My voice came out hoarse. You killed Daniel. His jaw tightened. He stood in the way, Leonard replied coldly. The company was slipping. Vanessa and I could have saved it. By murdering him? I whispered. His expression didn't change. You don't understand business, he said. You understand death. The cruelty of the words cut deep. Then another figure stepped forward from the shadows. Vanessa. Her face looked different now. No makeup. No composure. Just raw fury. This was never supposed to go this far, she said, her voice trembling with rage. If you had accepted a settlement, none of this would be happening. You killed your husband for money, I said quietly. She flinched. I loved him, she snapped. But he chose you over me in the end. He left me nothing. Nothing after everything I sacrificed. Her voice cracked on the last word. For a moment, I saw something beneath the anger. Not grief. Entitlement. She believed she deserved everything, and Daniel had taken that from her. Leonard pulled a small metal object from his pocket. A knife. My pulse thundered. We can still fix this, he said calmly. We stage another accident. A robbery gone wrong. Vanessa hesitated. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across her face. You said no one would get hurt, she whispered. Leonard's voice hardened. no one important. The words hit like ice. Vanessa's eyes darted to mine. And in that instant, something shifted because she realized the truth. Leonard had never cared about her either. Only control, only money, only power. Suddenly, distant sirens pierced the night. Loud, approaching fast. Leonard swore under his breath. Vanessa's head snapped toward the sound, and then she looked back at me. Our eyes locked. In that moment, I saw it clearly. Fear. Real, overwhelming fear. Because the truth had finally caught up to her. And this time, there would be no escape. But what happened next was something none of us expected. Because instead of running, Vanessa stepped directly in front of Leonard and said 3 words that would change everything. "You promised me." For a moment, the warehouse felt completely silent, except for the distant wail of sirens growing louder. Vanessa stood between me and her brother, her shoulders trembling, her hands raised slightly, as if trying to hold him back. "You promised me," she repeated, her voice breaking. "You said no one else would get hurt." Leonard's expression hardened into something cold and unfamiliar. "I promised you control," he said flatly. "I never promised you clean hands." The words hung in the air like smoke. I watched Vanessa's face change in slow, painful stages. The anger drained first, then the arrogance. What remained was something raw and terrified. For the first time since this nightmare began, she looked small. "You told me Daniel would never find out," she whispered. "You told me it would look like an accident." Leonard laughed quietly, the sound devoid of warmth. He jerked his chin toward me. A wave of cold realization swept through me. She had wanted money, power, security. But Leonard had wanted something much bigger. Total control of Mercer Marine Supply. "Daniel and Curtis?" Vanessa asked suddenly, her voice shaking. "You said he overdosed." Leonard didn't answer immediately. The silence itself was the answer. Her breath hitched. "You killed him," she whispered. He shrugged. "He was weak," Leonard said. "He talked too much." A chill crawled up my spine. This man wasn't desperate. He was methodical. The sirens were closer now, echoing against the metal walls of the warehouse. Leonard's jaw tightened. "We don't have time for this," he snapped. "Move." He grabbed Vanessa's arm roughly and tried to pull her aside, but she didn't move. Her eyes flicked to me. For a brief moment, something passed between us. Not forgiveness, not understanding. Just the shared knowledge that we were both standing at the edge of something irreversible. "I won't let you do this," she said quietly. Leonard's eyes darkened. "You think you have a choice?" he asked. She swallowed hard. Then she did something none of us expected. She stepped closer to him and said, loud enough to carry through the warehouse, "You killed Daniel. You ordered the brakes cut. You paid Curtis Boone, and when he became a risk, you had him eliminated." Leonard froze. Rage flashed across his face. "What are you doing?" he hissed. Vanessa's hands shook, but her voice steadied. "Saving myself," she said. In that moment, I understood. Vanessa had finally realized the truth. Leonard had never been protecting her. He had been using her. And now that the law was closing in, he would sacrifice her without hesitation. Her only chance was to turn against him. Footsteps thundered outside. Police voices shouted commands. Leonard's eyes darted toward the exit, then back to Vanessa. "You stupid woman," he said quietly. He raised his hand. For a split second, I thought he was going to strike her. Instead, he lunged toward me. Instinct took over. I twisted sideways just as the warehouse doors burst open. "Sheriff's Department! Drop it!" Bright lights flooded the room. Leonard froze. A dozen red laser sights danced across his chest. The knife slipped from his fingers and clattered onto the concrete. Within seconds, deputies tackled him to the ground. Vanessa sank to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably, and I sat there, hands still tied, heart pounding so hard it felt like it might break through my ribs. Because the nightmare was finally collapsing. But it wasn't over yet. Not even close. Because the real battle was about to move into a courtroom, where truth, betrayal, and revenge would be laid bare for everyone to see. The weeks after the warehouse arrest moved in a blur of court dates, depositions, and endless media coverage. Leonard Crane was charged with multiple counts, including murder, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. The evidence against him was overwhelming. Financial records, the recording, Trevor Haynes's testimony, and Vanessa's own statement. Vanessa herself faced charges of conspiracy to commit murder. But something unexpected happened. She agreed to cooperate fully in exchange for a reduced sentence. I saw her again for the first time during a preliminary hearing. She looked completely different. No designer clothes, no perfect makeup, just a pale woman in a plain suit, her hair pulled back tightly, dark circles under her eyes. When she took the stand, her voice trembled. "I never wanted Daniel dead," she said. I felt something twist inside my chest, because part of me believed that was true. Not out of compassion, but out of understanding. Vanessa had been driven by greed and entitlement, yes, but Leonard had been driven by something colder. Ambition without limits. "He told me Daniel was going to leave me," she continued. "He said if I didn't act first, I would end up with nothing." The words echoed through the courtroom. Nothing. That had been her greatest fear. Not love lost. Not grief. Loss of status. Loss of control. She described the meeting with Curtis Boone. She admitted giving him money, but she insisted she believed Leonard would only stage a minor accident to pressure Daniel. "I didn't know he would actually kill him," she whispered. The courtroom remained silent. Whether her claim was fully true or not, one thing was undeniable. She had set the chain of events in motion, and people had died because of it. Daniel, Curtis Boone, June Talbot's brother. So many lives shattered. During a break in the proceedings, Vanessa approached me quietly in the hallway. For a moment, we stood facing each other in silence. Two women bound forever by the same man's death. "I hated you," she said finally, her voice low. "Not because of Daniel, because you were content." I frowned slightly. "You didn't need what he had," she continued. "You could walk away." I couldn't. Her words surprised me. "You always had choices," I said quietly. She shook her head slowly. "When you grow up with nothing, you believe security is survival," she whispered. "I thought money would finally make me safe." Her eyes filled with tears, but it only made me lose everything. For the first time, I saw the full weight of karma settle over her. Not dramatic, not theatrical, just devastatingly quiet. Months later, the final verdicts were delivered. Leonard Crane was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Vanessa received a lengthy sentence for conspiracy, though reduced due to cooperation. The inheritance case was dismissed entirely. Daniel's will remained intact. The estate was legally mine. But standing outside the courthouse that final day, I realized something unexpected. The money no longer felt like a victory. It felt like a responsibility, because Daniel's death had exposed more than betrayal. It had exposed how fragile security really is, how easily greed can twist love into something unrecognizable. As I walked toward my car under the soft Georgia sunlight, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Peace. But the story wasn't quite over yet, because there was still one final truth I needed to uncover. Something Daniel had tried to tell me before he died. Something hidden, not in court records, but in the past we had shared. And discovering it would change how I saw everything, including myself. 3 months after the verdict, I finally walked back into the marshland mansion Daniel had once called home. Legally, it was mine now. The word still felt foreign. Mine. The house stood tall and white against the Georgia sky, shutters freshly painted, the long driveway lined with oaks draped in Spanish moss. For years, I had avoided this place. It had been the setting of that humiliating Christmas party, the symbol of everything I had lost. Now, it was silent, empty, and waiting. I stepped inside slowly. The air smelled faintly of polish and old wood. My footsteps echoed across marble floors. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, catching dust in the air. This was where Daniel had built his second life, and where it had ended. I wasn't there for nostalgia. I was there because Gregory had found something while transferring ownership documents. A safety deposit key hidden inside Daniel's old office desk. A key I had never seen before. I stood in that office now, staring at the mahogany desk where he had once signed contracts for Mercer Marine Supply. I ran my hand along the smooth surface, remembering the younger version of us, when we could barely afford rent, when we dreamed about success, but never about mansions. Back then, we had been partners. Somewhere along the way, we became strangers. The bank vault felt colder than the warehouse had, sterile, silent. The manager unlocked the deposit box and slid it toward me. Inside was a single, leather-bound journal. Daniel's handwriting covered the first page. If you are reading this, Lorraine, then the worst has already happened. My throat tightened. I began to read. He wrote about the pressure Leonard had been applying for months, about board meetings filled with subtle threats, about financial discrepancies he was only beginning to understand. But then the tone shifted. He wrote about me, about the years we struggled through infertility, about how he had blamed me silently for not wanting to try again in our 40s. I had always believed our divorce was quiet because we simply grew apart. But in his journal, Daniel admitted something painful. He had felt insecure. He had felt replaced in my priorities by my hospice patients, by my work, by my ability to accept loss when he could not. He mistook my strength for indifference. And instead of confronting that insecurity, he sought validation elsewhere. Vanessa had made him feel powerful, young, desired. Then I reached the final entry. I made a terrible mistake, he wrote. I let pride and ego destroy the only partnership that ever truly mattered. If anything happens to me, I want Lorraine protected. She never chased money. She never needed it. She only ever wanted honesty. Tears blurred the ink. For months, I had framed this as revenge, as justice, as exposure of betrayal. But standing there in the cold vault, I realized something deeper. Daniel's greatest regret had not been the company, not the inheritance. It had been losing us. Back at the mansion, I walked through each room slowly. The dining table where Vanessa once mocked me. The staircase where Daniel had followed me outside that Christmas night. You deserved better than what I gave you, he had said. He wasn't talking about money. He was talking about himself. For years, I had carried the quiet wound of being replaced, of being excluded, of feeling like I wasn't enough. But Daniel's journal revealed something humbling. I had never been replaced. He had been running from his own insecurity, and in the end, he tried to fix it the only way he knew how, by leaving everything to me, not as revenge, but as apology. For the first time since this began, I let myself grieve him fully. Not the man who betrayed me, but the flawed, insecure human man I once loved. And in that grief, something inside me softened. 6 months later, the mansion no longer felt like a monument to betrayal. It felt like a new beginning. I sold Mercer Marine Supply to a respected regional firm, ensuring every employee kept their job. A portion of the inheritance funded a foundation in Daniel's name to support hospice care across coastal Georgia. It felt right. Money that had been soaked in manipulation and greed now served something honest, something healing. I kept only one room untouched, Daniel's old office, not as a shrine, but as a reminder of how quickly ambition can twist into destruction, how favoritism and entitlement can grow into something deadly, how ignoring red flags can cost lives. Vanessa wrote me a letter from prison. I read it once. She apologized. Not for the money, not for the inheritance battle, but for letting jealousy turn into hatred. I did not respond. Some chapters close without reconciliation, and that is okay. People often ask me now if I feel victorious, if the revenge satisfied me. The truth is more complicated. Justice did not bring Daniel back. It did not erase the terror of being followed, kidnapped, nearly killed. It did not undo the family drama that splintered so many lives. But it restored something else, my voice. For years, I had been the quiet woman who avoided confrontation, the accommodating wife, the one who stepped aside. When Vanessa tried to paint me as bitter and excluded, I could have accepted a settlement and disappeared. Instead, I chose confrontation. I chose to look directly at the hidden truth. And yes, that choice nearly cost me everything. But it also revealed something powerful. I am not fragile. I am not replaceable. And I am not afraid of the light. On the anniversary of Daniel's death, I walked alone along the marsh at sunset. The sky burned orange and gold, the same color it had been the evening I decided to investigate instead of retreat. I felt no anger, no bitterness, only clarity. Karma does not always arrive dramatically. Sometimes it unfolds slowly, through courtrooms and evidence, and quiet decisions to keep going when fear says stop. Vanessa and Leonard believed money would secure their future. Instead, it destroyed it. Daniel believed power would prove his worth. Instead, it cost him his life. And I believed I had been discarded. But in the end, I was the one who stood. If you are listening to my story and you have ever felt excluded, manipulated, or quietly replaced, I want you to hear this. Do not underestimate the strength that comes with age. Do not silence your instincts. And do not walk away from the truth simply because it is uncomfortable. Sometimes the greatest revenge is not destruction. It is survival. It is rebuilding. It is standing in the light after someone tried to bury you in the dark. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of your own strength, take a moment to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe so we can continue telling stories where justice may be delayed, but it is never denied.